Christians, God bless you. I'm going to continue in the series that I've been doing on migrating to new positions in God, new levels, new positions in God. And I have a lot to say, a little time to say it, so I'm going to jump right into it. We've covered a number of things already, but I want to always refer back to the key that started this whole series, and that is the whole concept of God doing some things and refreshing some things. The context that we're living in right now certainly is that we are experiencing the COVID-19 phenomena across the world, and it is still a challenge that is being worked out, so to speak. Um, the economic impact will become the next major global conversation. Right now, we're dealing with the epidemic across in different places all over the world, and right here, even in the Caribbean, we've also been having a conversation, a regional conversation about what's happening within our nation and the different things that's happening. As I speak right now, Barbados went for a 5 or 6 day stretch without having any new confirmed cases, and they've been releasing persons. Persons have been released out of the hospital or out of quarantine, and so on. So the numbers are going down. We're watching it. We're looking at it to see what's going on there. I'm hearing some good news coming out of St. Lucia as well, and certainly Trinidad and Suriname and Guyana, dealing with it. Jamaica, all through the region in this part of the world, so to speak, we're having to deal with the COVID-19. The conversation, however, that I want to have is as it relates to moving to new positions in God. We are in a place now where it's almost like God is saying, make the most of this time because a brand new world awaits you. All right, and so I talked about Abraham, and Abraham using him as a template. He comes out of the chaos of the Tower of Babel, as I said, towards Genesis chapter 11, we're introduced to him and his family. And then chapter 12, we're seeing where God makes a promise to him, and he's moving with that promise. When we come to chapter 13, well, he's moving with that promise, but it takes Lot with him. When we come to chapter 13 of the book of Genesis, we begin to see him departing from Lot. They had some kind of conflict, some kind of issue between the herdsmen of Lot and the herdsmen of Abraham, and they had to part company, so to speak. But in that moment, the Lord spoke to Abraham and told him that whatever he could see to the east, west, north, and south, God would give it to him. He went to a place now called Hebron that was in Mamre, and in that place, it was a game changer. And it's from that jump-off point that I began to identify some principles that you can look forward to, that you can pray about, that you can put before God as it relates to your life, because I think that these things are very much relevant for you today in different ways. Whether you are a senior leader of a church or an organization, whether you're a member of a church, you have some kind of leadership responsibility within your church, or you're simply a newly born, believer, these principles are applicable to you. One thing about principles is that they can be used in different contexts and in different situations. So we try to stick to the principles, so to speak, rather than try to get too literal and too much into the actual thing that people did back then, or thing that they would do 100 years ago, or what have you. But once we can extract the principle, then we have some kind of a navigational instrument to go forward. So God bless you as we begin to explore now what I call the Melchizedek experience. The Melchizedek experience. He comes to Hebron, and a lot of things begin to happen to him from there. I'm actually looking forward after this session, one of the sessions I want to talk about, where he breaks that, he defeats the death principle. Because as you know, we're introduced to him as someone who's barren, his wife is barren, he has no child, and somehow God breaks that principle in his life and in Sarah's life, and they have not only Isaac, we hear about Isaac, but there are so many other children that came out of that womb because the Lord broke that, destroyed that death principle that was in his life. But that's not what we're talking about right now. We want to talk about Melchizedek and what he represents, and the fact that Abraham had a Melchizedek experience. But the key here is that Hebron positioning, all right? Environment matters. I want to say that very, very clearly. When God told him that whatever he can see, he would receive, he would get, so to speak, he changed and went to Hebron. Now, that for many of us listening right now is not necessarily a physical relocation as it is a spiritual shift in our lives, a spiritual shifting. And we went through a number of ways, a number of things, ways that can happen. So now, one of the things now, he went out and he fought against 5 kings and defeated them. And on the way back, he runs into this guy called Melchizedek. Now, Melchizedek, for all intents and purposes, is a surprise where the narrative is concerned. You read in the book of Genesis, and it's like he came out of nowhere. Yeah? Abraham seems to be the carrier of the purpose of God. He's the one that God made the promise to in chapter 12 and said, I'm going to bless you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed, and so on. So you get the impression, if you don't read ahead, and if you didn't know the story, and you're just reading along, you say, where does this Melchizedek come from? And I want to extract this principle to talk to us today about the whole issue of a Melchizedek experience. So Melchizedek then, he represents a relationship that will take you into greater revelations of God. Yeah? Now, Melchizedek was the priest of the Most High God. And you can do a research on him. You can actually go into the New Testament also and research Melchizedek. But what you see here is that when Abraham comes back from battle, Melchizedek offers bread and wine. He was the priest of the Most High God, and he blesses Abraham. Yeah? And he said, blessed be Abraham of God Most High. Yeah? Blessed be Abraham of God Most High. That's very, very important right there. It has to do with God being the Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth and so on. But what I want you to notice in that is that Melchizedek introduces something new, something different into the story, into the narrative. Prior to this, we've never heard about this Most High God, this God Most High. But here comes Melchizedek, and he speaks this over Abraham's life. And the other thing that the Bible says in Hebrews chapter 7 and verse 7 is that the lesser is blessed of the greater. And this has nothing to do with the value of each human being, so to speak. It has to do with the level of understanding, grace, experience, and anointing that each person was carrying, so to speak. And if you follow Abraham, you notice that he was in fairly beginning stages of what God wanted to do for him. God had amazing things for him. Yeah? Powerful promises, powerful promises, powerful promises. That's one of the things I want to talk about as well. Moving beyond promise into the fulfillment. Not just the prophetic promise, but the fulfillment of it. But that's another session. All right. And God blesses him. Yeah? And Abraham now becomes someone who is enhanced because of his interaction with Melchizedek. That is very powerful, very, very significant. Now, we need to be able to, in this season, as I've said before about the zero principle, and I'm talking fast because we have a lot to do. I might have to do this in 2 sessions. The zero principle, and that is when God hits divinely a reset button, everything goes back to zero, and you don't so much have experts as you have learners, people who are willing to learn, who are willing to change, and so on. John Maxwell, in his book, 15 Inevitable Laws of Growth, talks about what he calls the law of modeling. And in this law, he states very simply that it's hard to improve when you have it says it's hard to improve when you have no one but yourself to follow. Yeah? It's hard to improve when you have no one but yourself to follow. Melchizedek represents someone who had a greater capacity, greater experience, greater understanding of God, and God brings him, although it was temporary, it was not a permanent situation in this case, but it was something that enhanced Abraham's life and empowered him. And this is what I'm saying to you, that there are Melchizedek moments, Melchizedek experiences that God has in store for you. And all it will require is for you to be open to be able to receive this. Now, I don't know if you've heard the story told about this man. He said he went to this counselor, and his wife, after 10 years, his wife walked out on him, just kind of left him. And he went to the counselor and he said, I don't know what happened. I need some help here. My wife, after 10 years, she just walked out on me, and I don't know what's wrong. The counselor said, well, did anything happen? You have an argument? Nothing. He said, well, it's only that she said to me, you don't ever tell me that you love me anymore. And I said to her, 10 years ago when we got married, I told you that I loved you, sweetheart. And if anything changes, I'll let you know. And the counselor said, well, is there anything that you see or that you've learned that you would take as a lesson going forward? And he said, nothing that I can think of. The issue and the point here, of course, is that we have to be willing to learn. And circumstances and different things will help us to learn in this season. I'd like to also quote Anwar Sadat, and he said this, the late Anwar Sadat, Prime Minister of Egypt, he said, he who cannot change the very fabric of his thought will never be able to change his reality. All right? He who cannot change the very fabric of his thought will not be able to change reality and will never, therefore, make any progress. That's an interesting statement and something to ponder on. The Melchizedek moment, the Melchizedek experience is when God brings people into your life. And my goodness, through that encounter, you can go to new levels in God. Now, there's a downside to this, there's an upside to this. The downside to it is that we don't want to exalt a man, a human being, or put them on a pedestal more than where they should be. And we got to watch that, yeah? There have been extremes of that in church history and so on, and that's not what we're talking about. The upside of that is that God does anoint people, God does empower individuals, and your interaction with them will help to enhance the destiny and the grace of God that is on your life. My goodness, I could say a lot more about this, but I just want to point you in the direction of that principle. And in this season where God is migrating you to new positions in Him, that you take advantage of Melchizedek moments as they come into your life. God bless you. God bless you. Share this with someone that you think will benefit from it. And I'm going to come in other sessions and deal with other things as it relates to this whole issue of migrating to new positions in God. Have a wonderful day, or evening, or night, whenever it is that you're listening to this. Amen.